October 11th, 1998. It's been almost 30 years since I left for Long Island, after retreating from the small UHF studio in Ashland, Kentucky and the life I once knew. Leaving only with a small suitcase and the clothes on my back, I ran, and didn't look back, from a childhood paradise that slowly evolved into a traumatizing nightmare. It was then and there that I was a young adult, down on my luck, barely making enough to pay the monthly rent for the apartment a friend and I shared. I was barely making minimum wage at my first job. I'd flip burgers for 9 hours a day in the heat. The small eatery was beside a long stretch of highway, which my superstitious boss used to call Ghost Road, the place where the ghostly hitchhikers would hail rides from unknown passers-by. I switched my apron in for a fluorescent vest to start pulling shopping carts into the local grocery store and mopping floors for 12 hours a day, 5 days of the week again. Barely making minimum wage. I quit after only 4 weeks of working to look for a better, higher-paying job after receiving a notice that I was going to be evicted. It was like reading the morning paper 3 days later. That was when I found an answer. Perhaps this would be the answer to my problem. The small article in the wanted ads called for pairs of helping hands that build set pieces for kids shows at the small nearby UHF studio that was about 30 minutes away. Oh, I was excited. I ran for my red sedan, hoping to get there before somebody else could. Something told me this would be my day, and I was hoping it would. After driving for what felt like 40 minutes, I pulled into the nearly abandoned parking lot and looked for an unlocked door, or at the very least someone to unlock said door. At last I found a door that would open. I was hit by a blast of cool air from the air conditioners being nearly on full blast. Oh, I was about to approach the front desk to ask for more info about the job offering, but was stopped by an older gentleman in khaki pants and a blue polo, with neatly combed-back brown hair and green eyes. When he asked if I was there for the job position, I said yes, and he smiled from ear to ear. He gripped my hand like a python and shook it. He seemed overly excited. Perhaps he forgot to take some medication that morning or was on a caffeine high. I wasn't sure which. Maybe both. I couldn't tell you, honestly. "The name's Bob Fields," he said, still shaking my hand. "Or just boss. I'm so happy that somebody saw the article. Times have been really tough because of the recent tax cuts and stagehands walking off. Please, follow me." When he finally let go, my hand was red and numb. I followed him through the halls of the set, trying to shake it off. Mr. Fields was a strange person, but could you blame him? He loved his work, seemed to love the people there like a second family. Arriving onto the set, there were about a dozen people in different parts of the large room, which made me think that they shot different shows in one room at the same time. He showed me around the room and explained the different shows they were working on. It didn't take an expert to take one look at the set pieces and realize how cheap and awful they were, making it loud and clear how seriously low budget they were. I knew times were tough, but not this tough. The first show that he introduced me to was called Jumbo Circus, an educational kids show that showed kids how to count, tell time, identify colors, shapes, other things. It's a very basic program for the pre-K demographic. After meeting the director and cast, I declined. It's nothing against them, but it was my extreme coulrophobia which had haunted me since I was a child. Fields then demonstrated another show to me. This one tried to be educational, in the sense it tried to teach kids moral lessons in each episode. Unlike Jumbo Circus, where it was mostly live action, with people making up most of the cast, this one had a cast consisting of only puppets of different shapes, sizes, textures, and colors. This one was called Sunshine City. It followed a group of puppet kids who deal with real-world problems that most kids had never heard of or experienced. Common morals were those such as stealing is wrong, treat others the way you'd want to be treated, respect authority. But some of the episode themes were rather serious, especially for a kids' show. One of the episodes was about one character named Lucas who was bullied by another puppet named Peter because his felt skin was an abnormal color, and the only one of all the puppets on the show. One of the puppeteers, who I spoke to shortly before I moved, told me about the darkest episode the show did. It was seen only once because of the content, and it resulted in the immediate cancellation of the program. In it, the sad orange puppet named Ron was more upset than usual. He did his usual, "woe is me" speech, then left, not returning until the last 2 minutes of the program. In that short time, Ron could be seen sitting on a rock by the train tracks, staring at the cardboard sunset horizon. Sounds of a train could be heard, getting louder and louder with every second. Ron sighed and stood up. As the train sped forward, Ron jumped out in front of it and the scene cut to black. The last shot was a fade in showing Ron's dismembered puppet arm lying beside the tracks. Cotton was coming out of the limb, and the train chugs onward into the sunset. The final scene and the credits rolled in silence. The nature of the episode was weird to me. It made me feel uneasy. I again declined the offer. Field sighed and showed me the third program they were working on. It was another puppet one. It was about pirates. The title of the show on the script was Pirate Place, but seemed to be crossed out faintly in pencil with a new name written beside it. Candle Cove. Fields explained the plot of the show. She was about a girl named Janice who'd go on adventures with a pirate named Percy, who wasn't a really good pirate because he got scared real easily. The more he spoke about it, the more interested I became. He told me about a boat with an Edwin-like voice. He conjured up images of a smiling boat with big eyes that seemed to swallow the sea and sing. I could faintly hear Calliope music playing as the waves would crash against the boat. He explained two other characters, the villains. There were two strange puppets. Horace Horrible, who had tall teeth, a handlebar mustache, and a monocle. The Skin Taker, who was a skeleton on strings, with glass eyes and a cape and top hat. The character of Janice reminded me of myself as a kid, dreaming about going on adventures and looking for hidden treasure on the seven seas. I signed up for the project and Field smiled. He introduced me to the director of my childhood dream, Emerson Grimes. Grimes seemed like an okay guy. He was wearing hiking boots, blue jeans, a Hawaii shirt. He was also wearing a trucker hat, perhaps hiding, thinning hair. He took me to a rec room where the rest of the small crew was drinking tab and playing darts. At the time, there were only 3 voice actors: Todd Smith, Pirate Percy, Michael Cullen, the Skin Taker, and Leonard Lloyd, the Laughingstock. They were still looking for someone who was the embodiment of Horace Horrible. They were sending out the casting director and a crew member to find somebody to play Janice. A week later, they found somebody to voice Horace Horrible. Grimes found comfort in Jeremy Kirby, who'd recently finished working on another kids program for the studio called Fisherman Fred, and would have gone on to do backstage work for another program, Peppermint Park. Around the same time, they found somebody to play Janice. She was a kindergarten student from a nearby school, Jodie Silver. Oh, Jodie was quiet and adorable. She didn't complain much, unlike most kids who auditioned. All you needed to keep Jodie happy was an apple juice box, a peanut butter banana sandwich, coloring book. She was good to go. Helped get the ball rolling faster for us. They'd gone to local craft stores and flea markets with crew members to get props to build the puppets and the sets. The most tedious must have been building the Laughingstock, which took us about 2 weeks to do. Production started about 5 weeks after I got signed on. Production had been very rough and was becoming a challenge. Jodie would often come down with fevers and became overheated because of the intensity of the floodlights, which were always beaming down on her. It was becoming taxing for the stagehands, since Pirate Percy's head had to be remodeled twice after the prolonged heat melted his head. We became very concerned about her health and opted to find a body double so both could be switched out for each other. It was a common trick that many shows did, and we were about to do the same. But Grimes refused and said that'd be fixed and she'll adjust to it. In 3 weeks' time, Walter Shea, one of the gaffers, was injured on the set in a freak accident, resulting in a broken leg, leaving him on crutches for the entire show's run. Much of the crew and I considered abandoning the project because of Grimes' incompetence. But like everybody else who had it tough, we just bit our tongues and hoped for the best. After Shea was replaced, things seemed to go back to normal and we were on a normal schedule. Things seemed to be going up for us until episode 7 was in production. One of the writers, Abby Levi, revealed to me during a lunch break that Grimes had been destroying scripts and replacing entire stories. I hadn't even noticed it until she brought it up. Oh, evidence of his tampering was obvious, especially prior to episode 7, which was where it was extremely clear what was going on. Jodie, who knew her script like the back of her hand, would often be confused by stage positions and what she was supposed to do. She'd often ask Kirby, Horace Horrible, before takes, what she had to do again. Her parents would go over the script with her every morning and night, so the changes confused her. Originally in episode 7, Percy takes a scroll that explains where to go for the next hidden treasure from Horace Horrible. It was replaced by something of the macabre. It started off as being another episode, with Janice and Percy talking outside a cave, then somehow focused on the Skin Taker, revealing the dark origins of his hat and cape. Grimes told the cast to just go along with it, despite the eyebrows they raised. Michael Cullen, the skin taker, was the most uncomfortable of the episode because of both the script and how Grimes wanted him to present the dialogue. It was chilling, but he went along with it anyway. They didn't show anything explicit or violent, only delivering some lines which were subtle but still unsettling. The most infamous scene that most remembered was Janice asking why the skin taker's mouth moves the way it does. He didn't say it to her, but to the camera, "To grind your skin." It was this episode where I and the others started questioning Grimes' sanity. I wanted to believe he was just this way because of the long hours he'd work, but the others were trying to show me that that was not the case. He was a madman, and something had to be done. The episode resulted in lots of mail from viewers asking what the hell we were doing and what was going on. It also resulted in our first warning from the studio. If we got 2 more, then the program was going to be canceled, just like the future Sunshine City. I remember spending long hours in the rec room working with the writers and crew to jot down ideas and brainstorm. Somebody suggested a more comical episode involving Horace and a record player, and an awkward episode involving Janice's and the skin taker's birthdays, plus the introduction of a new character named Nathan. Nathan was written as Janice's next-door neighbor and friend. The ideas were pitched, sent to the studio, and approved by Mr. Fields, and were aired a few days later. After only 1 episode, Nathan was gone. Viewers wrote us letters asking where he went and if he's coming back. From websites I'd examined, Nathan's disappearance was a big topic and had many theories. Some fans claimed that he was kidnapped by the skin taker, having his skin made into a coat. Others believed he went back to the real world or that he got lost at sea. Those with even darker minds believed that Nathan was murdered on the set. We'd finished making episode 11 and we were set to air it the following Tuesday. Mr. Fields approached us saying that the ratings and views had been rocky. We had 1 more chance to prove ourselves. If the next one wasn't good, then the show would be canceled. If we could make an episode that knocked their socks off, then we'd be in good hands. Fields took the finished product and we went back to brainstorming for ideas. The next episode was going to be the most jam-packed and longest yet. There was going to be one last showdown between Percy and the villains to be king of the sea. Along the way, Percy would gain mass amounts of courage, and by the end, become a brave sea captain. In the end, Nathan would sail in on a wooden raft with a group of buccaneers to help Percy and Janice defeat Horace Horrible and the Skin Taker, who would both end up lost at sea, never to return. Janice ends up leaving the world of pirates to return to the real world, while Nathan would go on quest with Percy and the Laughingstock. She would only show up on occasions to help them, when they got scared the most. It was an idea approved by much of the crew and the cast. After hours of typing scripts, we sent a copy off to Fields and Grimes, hoping to save the show. Fields was out of town but called us saying that it was amazing. Grimes, on the other hand, upon receiving the script, had locked himself in one of the editing rooms for several hours. Production for the last episode was in late October, on a calm, quiet night in 1971. It was the most terrifying night of my life. I arrived on the set around 6:30 when the cast and crew for the other shows had left, leaving us on the set alone. The storm was picking up outside, causing the wind to pound against the structure of the building and the lights to flicker. Smith, Pirate Percy, and Levi returned with coffee and donuts and juice for Jody, and we waited in the rec room until we were expected to get on the set. A few of us were playing cards while Cullen, the skin taker, would play checkers and Old Maid with Jody. Shay, the injured gaffer, was keeping an eye on the news and the weather. It was around 8:15, later than usual, when Grimes opened the door, telling us to get ready in 5 minutes. In the few seconds he had his head in the door, I saw a change in him. His eyes were darker, hollower, slightly bloodshot. His skin was much paler. His hair seemed to be falling out. Jody grabbed onto Cullen's arm and buried herself in his side. You could hear him faintly whisper to her, "It's okay," repeatedly. At 8:20 we were on the set getting ready to go. We all had our scripts and went to skim them. Grimes walked over to us and took them, throwing them in the garbage. "There's a change in plans," he said. "Changes?" Smith asked, raising a brow. "What kind of changes?" "It's only something minor," Grimes said. "Don't you worry." Grimes turned her around, walking for a folder on his chair, still repeating, "Don't you worry," to himself. Coming back, he had a few pieces of paper, each for all of us. I choked, and I could see terror in the eyes of the cast and the stagehands that were looking over their shoulders. One word was written on the paper, over and over again, taking up the page, in bold, cap lock letters. "Scream." "Wilson," Grimes said, calling a stagehand. "Take Jody to the playroom. Don't forget to give her the new script." Tom Wilson looked at it with his eyes beginning to widen. Jody looked concerned. It was as if she'd seen a ghost or something. Tom sighed, taking Jody by the hand to the playroom where the young kids on the set would usually go to cut loose on their breaks. Grimes took the rest of the actors and some of the other crew members into a sound room, almost by the force of his disturbance. I remember how he would scream and shout like a lunatic, telling them to scream and cry and shout in the sound booth. I swear that the front desk secretary could hear it. I bet people would have thought the making of a snuff movie was going on if they just walked into the building. I was standing by Grimes, watching in terror, as Abby was crying in the corner, and Shay was doing what he could to comfort her. The fear that Cullen had in the infamous Skin Taker episode was coming back. He looked legitimately frightened. He put his hand around his throat and backed up to the wall. His face was pale and his eyes were watering. He fell down onto the floor, still gripping his neck in terror, staring at the cage microphone, which dangled above his head. Smith and Lloyd were shouting weird, almost inaudible phrases. Kirby's screams sounded like cries for help, as if they were his last words before he'd have his throat cut open, like a cow waiting at the slaughterhouse. The stagehands that were beside me and one of the writers, Jennifer Hess, could only watch in fear. Hess could be heard faintly saying, "What is this? Oh my God." One of the few things we said that could be heard in the episode. I shut my eyes and prayed it would stop, but it was only made worse, giving my imagination fuel in the thought I was making a snuff film. "Louder!" Grimes demanded, with insanity in his eyes and voice. "Louder! I want your throats to be bleeding by the end of the take. Louder! Harder!" Grimes went towards the set to give the other puppeteers directions to shake them and flail them around violently on the wooden and cardboard stage. Throw them, beat them, anything you wish. One of the puppeteers, Sandra Letting, would have gone on to describe the night in the episode making as a puppet snuff film. Screams and cries of the actors combined with the abuse of the set pieces just made it a nightmare. I'm surprised Grimes didn't request that we pour blood out of the laughingstock's mouth, or have Percy sacrificed to a sea demon, or even have Janice be made into a sweater on camera. Sandra Letting. The cameraman probably endured the worst of all. Not only having to record the abuse of the pieces we spent so much time working on, but also the death-like wails from behind it, all too surreal. He wasn't sure whether or not he was recording this disaster to distract him from Grimes murdering the actors. After being gone 20 minutes, Wilson came back with Jody. Her face and eyes were red. Wilson's were too. I'm not sure who cried more, him or her. Wilson refused to talk about it. I'm only led to believe he's deeply upset for having to put Janice through this hell. But it was a hell she would be happy with, since seeing the destruction of all the puppets she worked with would have broken her heart. The Skin Taker's jaw was hanging off a hinge. The strings on Percy were broken, as were some of his parts from him being thrown about. The strings that operated the laughingstock were snapped, and his foamed jaw was on the floor in a pool of sawdust. Horace Horrible seemed to be the only one to come out okay. Everybody left the sound booth in silence. Grimes took the recorded audio and locked himself in the editing room like he did before. The cameramen for the Puppet Death Theater and Janice's meltdown cracked the door open to give Grimes the footage. His pale arm reached through, snatching the reels before slamming the door and locking it. It was the last we ever saw of him. Smith, with a sore throat, took Jody home before the storm could get any worse. The rest of us left as quickly as we could and hoped that Fields or somebody would pack the props up. I went back to my apartment to pack everything I had up and drove for Long Island. I needed to separate myself from Ashland as quickly as possible, but I learned not too long after that you can't run from your problems. The rumored curse that plagued the set came back shortly after the final episode aired, and it hit hard. Grimes disappeared the night the episode aired. Nobody from the studio remembers seeing him leave, nor did anyone in his neighborhood or his wife. His car was still in the parking lot, but every trace of him was gone. The only thing that was left on our side of the set were the discarded scripts as well as some teeth and a large clump of hair, which were scattered about the floor, later being proven to match Grimes' DNA. He was presumed dead in December 1972 after several months of looking failed. Shay was injured in a car accident 6 months after the final episode was aired, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. Lloyd nearly drowned on a kayaking trip in 1973. Jennifer Hess, one of our writers, suffered third-degree burns in a house fire in the same year. Smith committed suicide in 1978 after being rumored to have lost lots of money in the stock market or losing a winning lottery number that would have made him a multi-millionaire. Colin's son, Trevor, murdered in the fall of 1981, 10 years after the infamous Skin Taker episode was aired. His killer remains at large. And both Wilson and Fields both died from massive heart attacks in 1987 and 1994, respectively. It's been nearly 30 years since that night. I'm still afraid to go back to the city, let alone watch another episode again. I've been emailed on different occasions by people claiming to have information about where to find the episode and the missing set pieces. I just end up deleting them. Nobody's sure why Grimes did this. I don't want to say he was just an artist gone mad, because I don't feel like I can. If you ever find one of us, please, I beg of you, don't bring up the show. We want to leave the past where it is and try to forget about it. I still get occasional nightmares and flashbacks to that day, and the ones building up to it. When they happen, it makes sleeping and eating almost impossible. To those claiming that they have a set piece, that's not likely. Nearly all the props and footage were incinerated in 1983, when the studio was destroyed in a freak fire. If anything survived the blaze, the location of them is unknown, and I'd rather not know where they are. And if anyone who remembers seeing the show was hurt in any way by it, I apologize deeply. But the nightmares you've had because of it will never compare to the ones I've had and still do.